Okay. So El Nino and La Nina have been around forever, but they really didn't make the news, or people didn't pay attention to these changes in weather conditions until about 1997. In 1997, there was some really extreme weather. So they were trying to figure out what created these extreme conditions. There was actually another pretty big one in 2015. You guys are probably old enough to remember all the snow we got that year. And there were some other conditions around the rest of the country that related to this. So what is El Nino and La Nina, and how does it relate to weather and climate? Well, we're going to start by just watching a video that summarizes them.
El Nino. We all know that in Spanish it means the Nino.
El Nino!
But what is El Nino? What about La Nina? What do they mean? I'm meteorologist Jason Myers, and El Nino and La Nina are both complex weather patterns that alter the entire weather landscape around the world. El Nino and La Nina are opposite phases of what's called the El Nino Southern Oscillation, or ENSO cycle. Both take place in the east central equatorial Pacific Ocean. In other words, off the coast of South America. During an El Nino year, there's an upwelling of warmer water off the coast of South America, and in a La Nina year, there's an upwelling of colder water. This difference in ocean temperatures then alter the weather around the world. Since oceans cover roughly 75% of the planet, they play a big part in our weather patterns. So when we see a big temperature swing over a large section of the ocean, it changes weather patterns worldwide. For the United States,
she's got a lot of toys. She's got like.
Someone's not muted there.
Let's pop some squeakies.
Gail, I think it's you.
And where is she? Oh my gosh, she's all the way out here on her own. Look at her. Little tiny baby. Out in the rain, no less. Bring her in. What are you doing? Come up here.
Gail, are you muted?
Okay. Oh, she's running in. She's hating being out.
States, an El Nino event will typically bring a warmer, drier winter to the northern half of the United States, while the southern half of the U.S. gets a colder, wetter winter. A La Nina will typically bring dry, warm winter weather to the southern U.S. and slightly wetter and cooler conditions to parts of the northern U.S. between the months of December and January. Both events, however, have very little effect on the United States weather in the summer. And one last thing. It's called El Nino because these events usually show up around Christmas time, and the South American fishermen who first discovered this was occurring called it the Christ child, El Nino. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. El Nino. We all know that in Spanish it
starts the thing. Okay. So how can one simple current create so much havoc around the globe? Well, the currents that cause this and the winds that create them are blowing across the Pacific Ocean. And you can see when we turn that side of the globe toward the screen, how vast the Pacific is. So there's very, very little continent showing when we have the Pacific Ocean facing us. So as the currents go across the Pacific, if they change weather patterns, they are greatly going to affect everything happening around the world. This is just a map showing water temperature. And as we would expect, around the equator, we're going to see the warmest water, okay, because that's where you get the most heat energy. At the poles, you're going to have the coldest water. But you'll notice here along the coast of South America, there's a little bit of an aberration or a difference in the temperature. And this is related to the winds that blow here and that equatorial current that results from it. So we are focusing on this area primarily and what happens out in the ocean here. So here's another video explaining what really happens during an El Nino and a La Nina event.
Every few years, the El Niño phenomenon kicks into life in the Pacific Ocean around the equator. It can affect weather around the world, changing the odds of floods, drought, heat waves, and cold seasons for different regions, even raising global temperatures. But what is El Niño and how does it happen? Firstly, we need to know what's normally happening in the tropical Pacific. This vast stretch of ocean sees consistent winds, called trade winds, that blow from east to west. These winds push warm water near the surface in their direction of travel, so the warm water piles up on the western side of the ocean around Asia and Australasia. On the other side of the ocean, around South and Central America, as the warmer water gets pushed away from the coast, it's replaced by cold water which is pulled up from deeper down in the ocean, a process called upwelling. This creates a temperature difference across the tropical Pacific, with warmer water piled up in the west and cooler water in the east. Warmer water adds extra heat to the air, which causes the air to rise with more vigour, and it's this rising air that creates an area of more unsettled weather, with more cloud and rainfall. That rising air in the west sets up atmospheric circulation across this part of the world, with warm, moist air rising on one side of the ocean and cooler, drier air descending on the other. This circulation reinforces the easterly winds, so this part of the world sits in a self-perpetuating state until El Niño begins. If conditions are right, tropical Pacific weather systems, or slow changes in the ocean around the equator, can set off a chain of events which weaken or even reverse the usual trade winds. With weakened trade winds, there's less push of warm surface water to the western side of the ocean and less upwelling of cold water on the eastern side. This allows the usually colder parts of the ocean to warm, cancelling out the normal temperature difference. Because the area of warmest water moves, so does the associated wet and unsettled weather. This changes rainfall patterns over the equatorial Pacific, as well as the large-scale wind patterns. It's this change in winds which has a knock-on effect, changing temperature and rainfall in locations around the world. The main impacts are around the tropics, where you see an increase in the risk of floods in Peru and droughts in Indonesia, India, and parts of Brazil. But virtually wherever you are in the world, El Niño has the potential to affect you directly via the weather or indirectly via socio-economic impacts. There's another impact from El Niño which happens because of all the extra heat at the surface of the tropical Pacific. This releases vast amounts of energy into the atmosphere, which can temporarily push up global temperatures. This is why El Niño years often feature among the warmest on record. Each El Niño event is different, so the global impacts can change. You can find out more about the differing impacts of El Niño on our website. El Niño peaks around Christmas time and lasts for several months. It can die back to neutral conditions, but sometimes reverses into La Niña. This is the flip side of the oscillation, which sees a strengthening of the normal trade winds. This pushes the warmest water to the far western part of the tropical Pacific and increases the upwelling of cold water in the east. This cooler water extends out from the coast of the Americas towards the central part of the ocean. La Niña also impacts global weather and tends to have opposite effects to El Niño. You can also see more about La Niña and its impacts on our website.
Okay. So my question to you now is, so you've heard a little bit about El Niño, you've heard a little bit about La Niña. Do you think we are going through either of these conditions right now? You don't really know enough about them, but do you think something is not normal? Do you think we're either in El Niño or La Niña, or do you think we're in normal conditions this year? Anyone have a guess? How frequently do we get snow before Christmas? Usually never, right? So I will tell you, this is one of those years. It is either an El Niño or a La Nina. So let's look a little bit more into them and we'll figure out which one it is. I'm going to figure out how to change the slide without it actually playing again. Okay, so real quick, just so you know what the water looks like in the Pacific Ocean during a La Nina or an El Nino year, you have excessive heating during close to the South American coast. Okay, so normally you would not have hot water near the coast like this. During El Nino, you do. In an El Nino or in a La Nina year, you have cold water, large amounts of cold water near the coast, and your warm water is pushed way over close to the Asian continent. In a normal year, it's a little more balanced. Your warm spot's going to be over here. You're going to have some warmth spreading out, but you will still have a little bit of cold water near the coast. So what is happening this year? We are actually in a La Nina. So you hear more about El Ninos because El Ninos are generally more catastrophic because they create massive changes in weather. However, La Nina is the one that affects the northern United States. And how does it affect the northern United States? First of all, let's look at the map of, this is the current map of the globe right now in terms of heating. You can actually go to a website and look up the ENSO cycle and it will show you this. So here's the equator and you can see that there is this band of cool water and then over near the continents it gets warm. So this is what it looks like during the La Nina. In 2015, which was an El Nino advisory, but it wasn't an El Nino year necessarily. You can see the difference here. We have all this warm water and very little cold water mixed in. Okay, so this is what the current conditions are. What does this do? During a La Nina, we have much colder temperatures up north than we normally have, especially out in the West and Midwest. But we do have still average temperatures where we are, and we know it is generally pretty cold in the winter. So we do still have cold temperatures, but let's take a look what happens to the rainfall as a result of this. You can see that we have higher than average rainfall, and it becomes very dry in the south during a La Nina. So because we still have cold conditions, we have lots of rainfall. When the wind is right, we tend to get lots and lots of precipitation. So we will have a very wet winter. It's not going to be all snow, but we will get a lot of snow. We will also get a lot of rain like we're going to be getting on Thursday night, unfortunately. So that is what La Nina and El Nino do. And that is it for today. Okay, no class tomorrow. You do still need to sign in to the attendance in Google Classroom. Spend some time watching Live Day, relax, stay in your PJs, and enjoy your Christmas break.